Good evening. Let's get this show on the road, shall we? I'm sure we all noticed we're not the only celebration happening on Main Street tonight. There's also a little thing called the Homecoming Pep Rally. So it may be that at some point this evening we'll have to take a pep rally pause while the drum line passes in front of the theater. And I won't even have to cue you. We'll know when that's happening. But in the meantime, good evening and welcome to the Stibitz-Wilson Awards presented by the American Computer and Robotics Museum. We're so glad you braved the parking and the pep rally crowds to come to the Ellen tonight as we honor visionary thinkers whose work is transforming classrooms, communities, and conservation around the world. I'm Eleanor Barker, the museum's executive director, and I'll be your MC this evening. In case you haven't visited yet, the American Computer and Robotics Museum is home to a truly remarkable collection of technologies that spans 4,000 years of human innovation, from ancient Babylonian tablets to Apollo spaceflight computers to quantum chips. Visitors come from across the globe to see our extraordinary collection, but what makes the museum truly special is not the rare artifacts on display, but the human stories they carry, stories of curiosity, risk-taking, creativity, and discovery. Tonight, as we present the Stibitz-Wilson Awards, we continue that mission, celebrating not only the tools and technologies that change our lives, but the remarkable people who imagine, design, and build them. The honorees you'll meet this evening are part of that story, and it is a privilege to share their achievements with you here in Bozeman. Of course, a free community event like this would not be possible without our generous supporters. So I'd like to express sincere appreciation to the following businesses, organizations, and individuals who have sponsored this year's Stibitz-Wilson Awards. Our Silicon sponsors are leading the way, starting with the Nels and Liz Lutweiler Foundation. Nels, I think, has been at least 15 Stibitz Awards, so he might be a prize winner in that category. And I think that Nels and Liz drove about 1,200 miles to get here. So thank you both so much for that. Also, Silicon sponsor, the Norm Asbjornson College of Engineering at Montana State University, and Mr. Jerry Orstrom. Our gold sponsors, the MSU Office of the President, the MSU Office of Research and Development. Silver sponsors, Robin and Robert Metcalf. Bob is with us tonight, and he features later on in the presentation, so we'll wait to applaud Bob when that happens. Silver sponsors also Renee and Fred Pera and the Weissman Hood Institute at Thoreau University MRI. Our copper sponsors, MSU College of Letters and Science, MSU Honors College, and Solodex Incorporated. And I also want to extend a special thanks to John and Catherine Hemingway, the Sacagawea Audubon Society, Wild Birds Unlimited, J-Tech Communications, Yellowstone Public Radio, and last but not least, our friends here at the beautiful Ellen Theater. What a treat to have a gem like this here on Main Street. Let's give these supporters a round of applause. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to bring Barbara Karamedjiev to the stage. Barbara and her husband George founded the American Computer and Robotics Museum 35 years ago, another achievement worth celebrating. Welcome, Barbara.
Yes, thank you, Adenise. Thank you so much. Good evening, and thank you all for joining us here tonight in this wonderful, beautiful Ellen Theater. I'm Barbara Karamedjiev, the co-founder and the board president of the American Computer and Robotics Museum. Yes, the museum is celebrating 35 years in business, and it all started with an antique calculator. Back in the 1980s, my husband George was visiting Florida on a business trip, and he wandered into a small antique shop. A 1906 Braunschweiger mechanical calculator caught his eye, but it was mislabeled. And he was just really surprised by that. It got him thinking, if people in this antique shop don't know what this lovely machine was, What about the general population? He has seen it for years in his consulting business, how so many people knew so little about the history of the tools and technology they use every day. And these technologies had such a rich and fascinating stories to tell. Yes, he bought that Braunschweiger calculator, and it became the first artifact in what has grown to become enormous and important collection that forms the heart of our museum today. Let me repeat, the museum just celebrated 35 years in Bozeman. We had a fantastic party in May, but we're not stopping there. The museum is always growing and changing. We're adding new artifacts and new exhibits. We're currently highlighting the World War II Enigma machine, and a quantum computing exhibit opens soon. We expanded our outreach to schools and most recently launched a whole calendar of hands-on programs for both children and adults. And we have exciting plans for the future that include a dedicated, permanent home where we can offer expanded exhibits and even more meaningful community engagement. We'll keep you posted on those as they take place. From the very beginning, George wanted the museum to focus not just on artifacts, but on people. He created exhibits and programs to highlight stories about people whose curiosity, drive, and brilliance have driven technological change throughout history. With this goal in mind, George came up with the idea for an award ceremony that would recognize unsung heroes of computer science and shine the light on the profound impact that the works of these people, men and women, have on our lives today. The Stibitz-Wilson Award is named for inventor George Stibitz, whose work in Bell Labs in 1930s helped stage the modern-day computing, and for biologist Edward O. Wilson, who's made landmark contribution to our understanding of the biodiversity and the world on Earth today. Before we meet this year's Stibitz-Wilson honorees, I'd like to recognize some former honorees who are with us tonight. First of all, Maury Irvine, who in 1997 received the award for the TRADAC, the first transistorized computer. And Maury is with us today at the bright young age of 101. Bob Metcalf was honored in 2012 for his significant contributions to networking technology, including his development of Ethernet, and Bob recently received the Turing Award too. Thank you, Bob. In 2014, we honored Kathy Whitlock for outstanding scientific research, advocacy, and public outreach to biodiversity. Thank you, Kathy. Rufus Kahn received his award in 2017 for groundbreaking contribution to quantum memory. Thank you, Rufus. And John Hemingway was also honored in 2017 for his distinguished career in nature filmography. Thank you all very much. The talent that has appeared on Stibitz-Wilson stage throughout the years has been astounding. And for some of the honorees, the Stibitz-Wilson Awards is just the beginning. So far, our Stibitz-Wilson alumni have combined to receive 2 Presidential Medals of Freedom, 5 National Medals of Technology and Innovation, 2 National Medals of Science, 1 Turing Award, 1 knighthood, and 2 Nobel Prizes. So let's get this tonight's program underway by meeting our first honoree. It's a privilege to welcome our first honoree, Dr. Cranor, a researcher whose work has fundamentally changed how we think about trust, safety, and human interaction in the digital age. Tonight's honoree, Dr. Lorrie Cranor, has spent much of her career focused on one of the most urgent challenges of our time, making privacy and security not just stronger, but more usable, understandable, and human-centered. Dr. Cranor has shown us that technology can be truly secure if people can't or won't use it. From uncovering the flaws in how we choose password to designing systems that balance protection with simplicity, her research bridges the world of computing, design, and technology. She has published over 200 influential papers and has brought her insight to global audiences throughout her widely viewed TED Talks and her many media appearances. Dr. Cranor is the director of Bosch Distinguished Professor of the Scilab Security and Privacy Institute and System University Professor of Computing Science, Engineering, and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon University. She is a fellow of Association for Computing Machinery, the Mechanical Association for the Advancement of Science, and IEEE. Tonight, we are proud to honor Dr. Lorrie Cranor with the Stibitz-Wilson Award for her contribution to the usable security, online privacy, and public policy. Please join me in welcoming her to stage. Thank you. You can just put it back here, okay? Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm really excited to be here and quite honored. I'd like to talk with you a little bit tonight about my research in security, privacy, and people. So my talk has three parts. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my research on passwords. That's the security part. Then we'll talk about privacy policies. And finally, I'll tell you a little bit about my security and privacy artwork. So we'll start with passwords. All right, so how do you all pick passwords? Well, a lot of people use their birthdays or their dog's name. These are not very good ideas. And there are a lot of rules you've probably seen about how to pick good passwords, and they're all different. Every website seems to have a different set of rules. So about 15 years ago, my students and colleagues and I started wondering, well, what's the right set of rules? What's the best way to help people pick strong passwords that they can actually remember? So we turned to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which has guidance that is normally looked at to set up password systems. And we read their guidance, and what we found out is they didn't really know. They said, unfortunately, we do not have much data on the passwords users choose under particular rules. So we thought, well, this is a good research problem. Maybe we can get some data. So we ended up using crowd workers, and we developed a study where we asked people to come to our website and create a password under a set of rules that we gave them. And then they filled out a survey, and then we asked them to come back 2 days later and try to remember their password and fill out another survey. And we paid them a few dollars for this. So we collected data from about 10,000 different people, and we were able to analyze it and get some ideas as far as what things made passwords more usable and what things made them more secure. So for example, we found that if you ask people to make their passwords longer, that was actually pretty effective. The longer passwords are generally still fairly usable, and they are a lot more secure. But if instead you ask people to just add a symbol to their password, well, everybody just puts an exclamation point at the end, and that doesn't really help security. We also wondered whether password meters would actually help people be more secure. There are a lot of password meters out there, and so we did studies like the one I told you about, but this time we showed people password meters while they created their passwords. And we found that password meters actually can be helpful and can help people create stronger passwords, but a lot of the password meters out there actually give you incorrect information or not very useful information. So we developed our own password meter, which is based on the data we collected in our research. And it gives you actually actionable and useful advice about how to improve your password. For example, if you're going to put a number in your password, it's best to put it in the middle and not at the end. All right, I'm going to give you a preview of the art part of the talk. So I made this quilt. This is a quilt which is based on some of the most popular stolen passwords. And in the process of making this quilt, I actually looked at 1,000 popular passwords, and I categorized them and color-coded them thematically. I discovered that numbers are really common in passwords, not just like the one at the end, but the whole string of numbers. Also, love is really common in passwords. Like, I love you in like every language you can think of. It's really common in passwords. And then monkeys are really common in passwords. I don't fully know why. So anyway, I called this quilt Security Blanket, and Science Magazine was having a scientific visualization challenge, and so I entered it, and it won honorable mention, and so it was in Science Magazine, which was fun. I also made a dress to go with the quilt, and some of my friends made t-shirts and ties, and one of them upholstered a chair. And then during the pandemic, I made my whole family masks, and I made another dress with long sleeves and pockets, and then of course I had to make the password ball gown. So if you see your password on my dress, please change it. Right. In 2016, I spent the year away from Carnegie Mellon. I was working at the Federal Trade Commission as the chief technologist. And one of the things I got to do was write blog posts that were on the front page of the FTC website. And so I decided to tackle some of these strange password rules. And one of the things that always really bothered me are these password policies that require you to change your password every 60 or 90 days. The US government has a lot of that. It doesn't really make any sense. And there's a lot of research, not just from my lab, but a lot of other researchers have looked at this. And this is not really an effective way of improving password security, and it really annoys people. So I wrote an article about it. It got a lot of press. People were very excited. Ultimately, NIST actually changed their passwords guidance, and they actually backed off of their suggestion that that organizations require frequent password changes, and that organizations require a lot of symbols and special characters in passwords. So that was exciting. There are still plenty of organizations that are not paying any attention to the new guidance. Sorry, but things are moving in the right direction. All right, so what should you do to improve your password? I recommend that you create long nonsense words and put your digits or symbols in the middle. I know it's really hard. You should not have the same password everywhere. You should have unique passwords. So instead, just use a password manager. That's what I do. That's what I recommend. It takes some time to get it up and running, but once you have it, it works really well. And also, when you have the opportunity to use two-factor authentication, you should. Okay, let's switch to privacy now. So back in the 1990s, websites started posting privacy policies, and they all looked like that. They were really long. No one wanted to read them. And so people started saying, why can't they be really short, like food nutrition labels, and standardized? I worked with my students to try to come up with a privacy nutrition label. And we did research with people and came up with some good ideas that tested really well. We talked a lot about them. They were never adopted, but I think some of the ideas from our privacy nutrition labels stuck a bit. Then we tried to do the same thing for mobile apps. So this was for the Android App Store. We did a study. It worked really well. We sent a copy of the paper to Google and also to Apple. This was back in 2013. Nothing happened. And then in 2020, Apple actually rolled out mobile app privacy nutrition labels, and then Google followed shortly thereafter. So we were super excited about this until we started looking at them closely and realized that they, well, maybe weren't very good. So we did a lot of studies, wrote a whole bunch of papers. We found that app developers don't understand the terminology and therefore create inaccurate labels, and end users don't understand them either, and so not super useful. So we decided to redesign them. So this is our redesign of the iOS label, and it has tested really well. And so far, Apple has not expressed any interest in adopting it, but maybe someday. All right, we also have been paying attention to some of the privacy regulation that has come down. So the state of California adopted the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, which among other things says that there should be a link for consumers to opt out of the sale of their personal information. And it also says that there can be a button or logo next to that link. So we talked to the California Attorney General's office and asked them, what is this link and this logo, and can we help you? And they said, yeah, we have no idea. So I worked with my students and colleagues, and we brainstormed a whole bunch of ideas of what would be a good icon to help inform consumers about their privacy choices. And then we worked with design students to actually make them look pretty, and we ran a bunch of user studies to try to figure out what would communicate best with people. We wrote several reports for the California Attorney General, and lo and behold, they adopted our preferred icon, this stylized toggle. So that got adopted a few years ago, and initially nobody was using it. But more recently, we have actually seen it popping up on retail websites in the US. So check your favorite online retailer, you will probably see our little icon. And if you click on it, that's where you can go to find out what privacy choices the company is giving you. I can't guarantee you they're good choices, but you will find your choices there. All right, we've also looked at IoT devices. A lot of people are concerned that their IoT devices may be snooping on them. And it's very difficult to find out about security and privacy of your devices. If you look on the web page, you look on the package, there's usually no information. So we designed a nutrition label for privacy and security of IoT devices. And we wrote a bunch of research papers. We shared it with IoT device manufacturers. Again, they weren't super interested in this. But then a couple years ago, the Biden White House actually decided that we would have a US cyber trust mark for IoT devices. And they invited us to come talk with them about what these might look like. And so we've been presenting our ideas. I suspect what finally gets adopted will not look anything like what we proposed, but we've been at the table and hopefully we're making it a little bit better. All right, last thing I want to talk about is back to artwork. So I got interested in the idea of the art of privacy back in 1993. Probably a lot of you remember this New Yorker cartoon on the internet, Nobody Knows You're a Dog. And I thought it was so cool. As a graduate student, I recreated it with a photograph in one of my grad student friends' dogs. And this was the cover of the ACRM Crossroads Student Magazine. Okay, so I also, over the years, have experimented a lot with photography, and I got this little plastic lens I could put on my mobile phone and take really, really close-up pictures of things. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. These pictures are so close up, you can sort of not really even tell what they are, which is sort of privacy protective. And so here's an example. You can see it's a coneflower, and this is what it looks like close up in the middle. And so I digitally printed this on fabric and cut it apart and sewed it back together. And this quilt is called de-identification. Then I also experimented with pixelated images. So I pixelated my face back when I had blue hair. And then I cut up fabric and created a quilt with pixelated me. Then I wondered, well, what do other people think when they visualize privacy? So I went around and asked people, draw a picture of privacy. I asked adults and children. These are kindergartners with their images. I collected about 500 of these images and put them on our Privacy Illustrated website. So I have lots of pictures of windows and doors and locks and keys and eyeballs and surveillance cameras. Also a lot of potties. and potties with locks and doors too. Showers, people having their privacy invaded in the shower. Even adults also draw potties. It's a very common theme. And more recently, I decided to write a children's book for 4 to 6-year-olds about privacy. And I was trying to figure out how would I explain these concepts. And so I went back to my collection and used that to help frame the book. So this is a picture at our local library. I was reading an early draft of the book. It's story time. Now I'm actually working with a professional illustrator to illustrate the book, which uses a lot of animals and concepts that children can relate to. So hopefully in the next few months that will come out. All right, I will leave you with a photograph of students and a unicorn in my lab, just to illustrate that all of the work that I've talked about is not just me, but actually a whole army of students and colleagues who have been working on these things, and this is just a few of them. So thank you very much.
And thank you so much. And I have just one question for you, and it is, what do you think will be the biggest privacy or security challenge people face in the next decade?
Yeah, so I think as far as privacy goes, the problem is that we are collecting data at a very rapid rate, and in part it's to feed all of the AI engines that need a lot of data. And there's a tension between personal privacy and wanting all the cool and exciting services that are coming to be. And we hear largely from industry that it's almost like there's no choice. You just have to provide the data or else we won't be able to have all of these modern things we want. But I feel like we do have choices, and we do sometimes need to put the brakes on and have discussions about how we can have our data, have our innovation, but not at the expense of personal privacy.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I, for one, am pretty confident that I'm not the only person who's going to go home tonight and change a couple of passwords. Thank you so much, Lorrie, for that informative presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Dr. Nicholas Lux. Dr. Lux is a professor in Montana State University's Department of Education, where he teaches in the curriculum instruction and teacher education programs. He has more than 25 years of experience in K through 12 and teacher education, and focuses his teaching and research on digital learning in K through 12 settings, community-centered and place-conscious STEM learning, and STEM identity development in teachers and youth. Dr. Lux will present a Stibitz-Wilson Award to Dr. Mitchell Resnick for fostering creativity and innovation in STEM education. Welcome, Nick.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and to recognize a visionary who has dedicated his career to reimagining what's possible in education. Tonight, we honored Dr. Mitchell Resnick, the force behind some of the most influential creative learning tools of our time, including the programming language Scratch. Dr. Resnick is a leader in the movement to shift computer science education from passive consumption to active creative participation. The tools he has developed empower millions of children worldwide to design, invent, and express themselves through coding and robotics. He's shown us that when kids are given the right tools and a supportive community, they can build amazing things and develop crucial skills that they'll need for the future. His philosophy is rooted in what he calls the 4 Ps of creative learning: projects, peers, passion, and play. A powerful framework that provides a roadmap for fostering the kind of thinking that is essential for innovation. Dr. Resnick's ideas have not only influenced countless classrooms, but have also shaped how we think about the future of work and the skills needed to thrive in an ever-changing world. He truly embodies the spirit of curiosity and invention that this museum celebrates. Dr. Resnick earned a BA in physics at Princeton University and an MS and PhD in computer science at MIT. He is author of numerous books on coding and creativity and has been awarded the McGraw Prize in Education, the AACE Ed Media Pioneer Award, the ISTE Making IT Happen Award, the LEGO Prize, and now the Stibitz-Wilson Award. Please join me in welcoming a pioneer in creative learning, Dr. Mitchell Resnick.
Great. Thanks so much, Nick, for the introduction. And also thanks to Barbara and Eleanor and others at the museum for organizing all of this. It's been great to get a chance to come visit in Bozeman, and it's great to get a chance to talk with all of you tonight. I think a lot of you know, over the last couple decades, there's been a great expansion in the ways that young people are interacting with digital technologies. But I worry about the ways a lot of the interactions are taking place. Too often, digital technologies are designed to deliver instruction to children, or deliver entertainment, or deliver information. And I don't think that's the way that best learning happens. So in our lifelong kindergarten research group at the MIT Media Lab, we take a very different approach of trying to see how can we use new technology to engage children in designing, creating, experimenting, and expressing themselves, because I think that's what's really needed for them to develop the skills and capacities that are needed to thrive in today's world. Let me start just by giving you a few examples. One of them is, we've worked for many years with the Lego toy company. In fact, it was 40 years ago that we started working with them in 1985. And in many ways, the Lego brick is a great, metaphor for the type of learning we want. When kids, work with Lego bricks, they can build whatever is in their imagination, build all types of structures in the world. We started 40 years ago working with the Lego company to connect the Lego brick to computation. So kids could build not just structures, but things that move and interact and sense. And this has led to a variety of different robotics products like Lego Mindstorms, enabling children to really expand the range of what it is they can build. So it's not just interacting with toy robots, but creating their own. Of course, these days, children aren't just building things in the physical world. They spend a lot of time online and in virtual worlds. And again, we wanted children to be the designers and the creators in those worlds. It was our work with Lego that actually inspired some of the work that we did in creating Scratch, which Nick's mentioned. So Scratch is this graphical programming language that enables kids to create their own interactive stories and games and animations. And they do it by putting together graphical programming blocks, similar to Lego bricks. So putting these graphical blocks together to describe the behaviors of the different characters in the stories or games or animations. And then they can share their creations online. Since Scratch was launched in 2007, more than 150 million kids have created projects with Scratch. But even more important than just the number, for us, what's most exciting is if you look at what they're doing, you see the diversity and creativity. So you can see as kids are creating with Scratch, they're really taking their own imagination and letting it come to life on the screen with what they create. As much as we're really excited about all the different ways that young people are using Scratch and the way it's spread around the world, there is a limitation. We started working on it 20 years ago before there were mobile devices widely accessible. So we designed Scratch for laptops and desktop computers. But of course, these days, kids spend a lot of time interacting with mobile devices, especially in some parts of the world. That's the only digital device they'll ever have an interaction with. We want to make sure that young people don't just use mobile devices for watching videos and scrolling through social media, but again, to design, create, experiment, and express themselves. And that's what led us a couple of years ago to start working on Octo Studio. And Octo Studio, hopefully it'll come up. There it is. So again, you can create on the screen, and also it can make use of the sensors. You can shake the screen, make things happen. Or take it with you outside, use the camera, grab an image, trace it out, put a few blocks together, and you may have a little animation. embedded in a Frisbee and used a tilt sensor in order to make a driving game. Put it with cardboard to make a scene, a house that comes alive. Turn the flashlight on and off. Use the shake sensor to make a game. Send signals from one mobile device to another. Make an animated birthday card for a friend. Turn it into a video and then send it to the friend. So I think you see in this way is it's really trying to change the way young people engage with and relate to the digital devices in their life, where they really get a chance to be the designers, the creators with the device. And with all of these, like with those Scratch and Octo Studio, we've really made this commitment to keep it free because we want to make sure that it reaches all kids from all backgrounds and all situations. So you can just go to the App Store and download this or go to the website for Scratch and be able to start creating and sharing. Now, although it's great to get these products out to the world, our ultimate goal is really to shift educational approaches. And that's actually much more difficult. You know, we've been very successful getting Scratch out to 150 million kids around the world. It's more difficult getting educational ideas out there. I want to talk a little bit about just these educational ideas, what motivated them and how we try to get them out to the world. So, you know, again, as I mentioned, my group is called the Lifelong Kindergarten Group because I've always been inspired by the way children learn in kindergarten. If you think about the traditional kindergarten, the young people are playfully creating things in collaboration with one another. So they're always, you know, designing, creating things in a collaborative way. In doing so, they learn a lot of particular important concepts. They build a tower and they might learn about structures. They make a picture with finger paints, they learn how colors mix together. But I think even more important, they learn about the creative process. They learn how to start with an idea, carry it through, create something based on your idea, share it with others, get feedback and suggestions, iterate and make changes to it. And that's the way that creativity happens. And we think in today's world, the ability for young people to grow up as creative thinkers is more important than ever before. In a fast-changing world, young people are going to be faced with a never-ending stream of unknown and uncertain and unpredictable situations. So the ability to think and act creatively is so important. And the best way to develop as a creative thinker is to have lots of experiences creating. The traditional kindergarten gets kids off to a good start, but too often afterwards, kids end up sitting in rows, filling out worksheets, listening to lectures. So again, we call our group Lifelong Kindergarten because we want to take this kindergarten approach, extend it to learners of all ages. So projects like Lego Mindstorms and Scratch and Octo Studio are trying to extend that kindergarten approach to learners of all ages. As we've thought about it, our way of trying to get across those ideas and to engage people in kindergarten-like play, we came with these 4 guiding principles that Nick mentioned, that we call the 4 Ps of creative learning: projects, passion, peers, and play. That is, no matter what we're doing, whether we're developing a new technology, or developing a new workshop, or a new space for learning, we always ask ourselves, how can we engage kids working on projects based on their passions, in collaboration with peers, in a playful spirit? Because we've seen over and over that when people work on things they care about, they're passionate about, they'll work longer and harder, make deep connections to the ideas. And the most creative work doesn't happen just by yourself, but in collaboration with others. And in a playful spirit, meaning that it's not just about laughing and having fun, but when we say a playful attitude, we mean trying things out, experimenting, testing the boundaries. So let me show you a short video that shows you how we try to put these principles into practice. This is a short video from a workshop we did a few years ago using some of the technologies we were developing, some of the computerized Lego technologies, some of the programming languages. This was for a workshop where the theme that we gave kids was a day at the park. So they came in thinking, what would they invent for a day at the park?
The goal of these creative workshops is really to give children an opportunity to come up with their own ideas, imagine something, and then figure out how to design it.
We should still keep this plate, but take this.
They need to be constantly exploring, experimenting.
It works! Whoa, oh my God.
Through natural discovery, by testing things, by tinkering, by experimenting, by creating.
They're using Lego motors and sensors, and then if it doesn't work the way they want, they start revising it.
So you have to kind of adjust the motor power so it actually has enough power to knock the knights off.
So they're really learning through having a goal, imagining something, and then bringing it to life. So rather than just thinking of the computer of something that I think, what am I supposed to do? They start thinking, what do I want to do with it? They start getting new ideas.
I think you can see just from that short video the way the creativity comes alive. And you can see those 4 Ps in action. The kids weren't just solving a problem, going on to the next problem they were giving, but they came up with these projects, what they wanted to create, and it was based on their interests. You saw the variety of projects, which shows they were working on things they really did care about. You saw lots of collaboration. And maybe, in fact, what I like best is you see the experimenting. Things go wrong. You see that the pom-poms fly off at one point, not what they mean. The pirate falls off. But they see this as a way, well, let's try to do something differently, how we can change it. That type of iterative exploration is the key to the creative process, and this gives them the chance to do it. We try to design the technology to support that, but also it's so important to design the educational setting to support that, to make sure that kids can feel that they can try things, and if things go wrong, there's not really a problem if things go wrong. It's sort of a safe environment. They feel comfortable that they're not ridiculed if things go wrong, but encouraged to try new things. So we always try to keep these in mind no matter what we're doing. Let me end by talking about sort of what their ultimate goal is. The reason we want to sort of put these 4 Ps into action is we really want to help young people develop, as you can see, I have a real fondness for alliteration. We want to help young people develop as creative, curious, caring, and collaborative learners. And I think those qualities are more important now than ever before. I hope if I was around 100 years ago, I think I still would have tried to encourage these. But now I think it's even more important. A lot of times these qualities, although we see them as so important, they're not the things that are elevated in most educational settings. In many educational settings these days, efficiency and optimization and measurement is what's focused on, much more than human needs and interests and experiences. And I think helping young people develop the most human of their abilities, being creative, curious, caring, collaborative, is more important now. We see all these different disruptions going on in the world that I think are pushing even more important for us for young people to develop the most human parts of what they do. With the proliferation of AI, there's a risk that it could get out to the world that is taking away children's agency rather than letting them be the explorers and creators, is going to be delivering things to them, maybe in a very efficient way, but we want to make sure that they're the ones who are in control and have the agency. Politically also, with the rise of authoritarian governments around the world, it's more important than ever for young people to develop their own voices, to feel that they can make a contribution. So I think, for me, what's most important, we get these technologies to put them out in the world, but most important, we want to see them as the carriers of ideas, because I think there's nothing more important we can do than to help young people grow up in order to be sort of full, thriving members of tomorrow's society, to be able to grow up as creative, curious, caring, and collaborative learners. Thanks so much.
As an educator who's been enormously influenced by Dr. Resnick's work and the tools that he's created, but more importantly, seeing firsthand how those tools have shaped creativity, discovery, exploration, encouraged play in younger learners, it's moving to see you talk about that firsthand. So for that, thank you. To that end, I would like to ask you just one quick follow-up question. This notion of lifelong kindergarten, what does that mean for us as adults, as lifelong learners, and how we should continue to see ourselves as growing and learning?
Even though a lot of our work has been done with younger children, pre-college students, I think these same guiding principles of projects, passion, peers, and play apply to all of us. We certainly put them into action in our research lab. I think one reason the Media Lab has become an innovative place is because the graduate students, the researchers there, have the opportunity to work on projects based on passion and collaboration with peers in a playful spirit. Now, of course, there's sometimes challenges and constraints on adults' lives, and there are time limitations they have the opportunity to do the same type of exploring and experimenting. But I think it's so important for us to find ways, to carve out ways, to be able to continue to not just learn how to sort of follow things step by step, but to constantly be thinking, how might I, imagine new things, try it out, experiment with it, and keep iterating. So I do see it's a lifelong activity, continue to iterate and become a more creative learner.
One more round of applause for Dr. Resnick.
Thanks, Dr. Resnick and Nick Lux, for that insightful conversation. And now I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Dr. Jake Chips. Dr. Chips has nearly 2 decades of experience in public education. He served as a secondary math and computer science educator, an assistant teaching professor, teacher coach, curriculum developer, professional development writer and facilitator, state standards writer, academic program lead, and educational consultant. Jake holds a doctorate in learning technologies from Pepperdine and a master's in educational technology from Cal State Northridge. As program director at the American Computer and Robotics Museum, Jake develops curricula for both students and educators that empower learners to communicate understanding through identity-based constructionist models. Jake will be presenting a Stibitz-Wilson Award to Dr. Yasmin Kafai for fostering creativity and innovation in STEM education. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we honor an individual whose work has profoundly shaped how we think about technology, education, and creativity. Dr. Yasmin Kafai is a distinguished professor at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. Her research has pioneered the integration of computing and robotics into educational settings, empowering students to become not just users of technology, but creators and innovators. For decades, Dr. Kafai has explored how digital tools and platforms can foster a deeper understanding of complex subjects. From creating virtual worlds to designing wearable technologies, her work has shown us that learning can be a dynamic, hands-on, and deeply personal experience. She challenges us to see computing not as a solitary act, but as a collaborative and expressive art form. As a leading voice in the educational technology community, she has not only created innovative curricula, but has also been a powerful advocate for equity in STEM. And her influence extends far beyond the classroom, shaping national conversations and inspiring a new generation of researchers and educators. Dr. Kafai is the author of several influential books, including Connected Code, Why Children Need to Learn Programming, and Connected Gaming, Why Making Video Games Can Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. She earned her doctorate in education from Harvard University and is an elected fellow of the American Education Research Association and the International Society for the Learning Sciences. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Yasmin Kafai.
Where's the clicker? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jake, for the kind introduction in honor of receiving the Stibitz-Wilson Award. I would like you to tell you a bit about my intellectual journey, what brought me to the United States, and how I became interested in learning by design and coding, a topic which captures also in today's award theme of Code for Tomorrow. So let me see. So while I was born in Germany, I actually spent my first year in the United States. My father came in the early 50s from Iran to Germany to study medicine, to become a doctor. And at the time when he was finished, the United States needed more doctors, opened their doors widely to immigrants. Frankly, I don't remember much from anything this time in Kansas City, Missouri, where my father worked in St. Mary's Hospital. but there seem to be a lot of pictures of me on cars. Here is one with my mother. And my parents eventually returned to Germany. And a few years later, the German government decided to expand national health care and needed more doctors. So the doors opened again for foreign nationals like my father to open a family practice. Little did anyone know or expect that a good 20 years later, I would be the one taking the turn immigrating to the United States because I was interested in how computers could be used in education. I should say I didn't have access to computers during my school time. I only learned and used them when I started studying at the Technical University in Berlin in the 1980s. And I was fortunate to participate in one of the first man-machine projects where we researched how programmers made sense of code. But in Germany, there was no interest in getting computers in the school. To the contrary, teachers refused to even let them into their classrooms. The place to be was in the United States. So I received a scholarship from the German government and started working with Elliot Soloway at Yale University. And later I moved to Harvard and MIT, where I worked with Edith Harrell. Here, Seymour Papert had promoted what was then a very wild idea, that children and not just adults could use and learn with computers. More importantly, he placed the primacy that children on programming computers and not the other way around. And this is what has defined my research agenda and that of my doctoral students over the last 30 years, how we can learn about technologies by designing and not just using them. The idea of learning by design, initially promoted by my advisor Edith Harrell, is a powerful rationale. I've been doing so in multiple ways and investigated how children can learn by designing their own games and sharing their programs, stitching their own variables, and even grow their own designs and write today's own AI application. Let me explain a little bit in more detail how each of those developed, and then you will see the common thread. So I started out over 30 years ago, by investigating an uncommon premise that children would not just be interested in playing video games, but also by making them. I had, as I mentioned, the good fortune to work in Seymour Papert's experimental school site called Project Headlight, which had hundreds of computers set up in Boston in a school. Then again, let me remind you the idea that, 10-year-olds would touch with their sticky fingers computers was a very bold proposition. And again, an even bolder idea was video games, which were considered a waste of time, that they would be interested in making their own games. And what you see here, is actually a video taken on the last day of the project after 6 months, where students were demonstrating the video games they had designed. Let me point out, these were 256K machines, but they were multimedia capable, and students had created games which they had designed for third graders in their school to learn about fractions, a topic which is universally hated then as well as today. And they wrote programs, games to teach quizzes. They made animations. They even composed music. And they also created advertisements and packaging boxes as it was custom at the time. They even designed, here is a great example of a skier going down a slope and hitting a bald spot, and then, big surprise, a fraction quiz will appear. And you will kind of see that is how you kind of were learning about things. It maybe shouldn't become to surprise these students who work diligently on creating their games in a comparative study, actually far surpassed in their understanding of mathematics as well as in programming all the other students in the class. But what is even more important, 30 years ago, the idea that kids would be interested in programming or making their own games seemed far-fetched, but today If you look at sites like Minecraft and Roblox with over 500 million users, the idea that we're kind of making and playing goes hand in hand. It is really not separate. One thing which is difficult when you kind of want to make a game is you actually need to understand a little bit of programming. And as Mitchell illustrated earlier, that really wasn't that easy for most schools. And in the 1990s to up to 10 years, programming, computer science wasn't part of the K-12 standard curriculum. We believed it was okay if kids just needed to know how to point and click and use the computers. But this has changed. 10 years ago, Quinn Burke, one of my doctoral students, and I wrote a book, Connected Code, Why Children Needed to Learn Programming, making the case that it wasn't just about becoming software engineers or programmer, but really, I mean, a part of general literacy to understand how technology works. And at the time, in 2002, Mitchell Resnick invited me and his group to actually help him design the SAFT programming language. So what you see here is, again, I mean, a repeat of what Scratch looked like. We received in 2003 a grant from the National Science Foundation to develop this tool. Where the idea was that typing what you could see actually on the screens in the previous video, which especially beginners make a lot of typos, wasn't really necessary. So equally important here in this particular program was that students were not just able to make or program the game, they were able to share their programs with a click of a button. I should mention that many people ridiculed us for this idea, but as it turns out nowadays, the number of people who are part of the Scratch community, the number of languages it has been translated, have proven otherwise. Who would have thought that kids would be interested in making their own games? So Scratch is now the most popular youth programming site. And I think as of last year, over 1 billion projects have been posted. And should I tell you, more than 1/3 of them are games which kids have designed and shared with each other. So I think these are all great examples on how we can develop pedagogical approaches like, you know, the kind of application games which students love to play and turn them around for making, and the tools. But equally intention, I think, in 2010, I began investigating how students could learn about coding by designing variables. Like my previous awardee, we have an interest in fashion and things. And so, believe it or not, we actually received several grants together with Kylie Pepler, Leah Beakley, who developed the first sewable microcontroller, Mike Eisenberg, and others to investigate this. And what does that actually mean when you have to design your own electronic textiles? So here's an example of a curriculum. What you're doing, you're stitching circuits using conductive thread, and then you start sewing the microcontroller to connect them to touch, light, and temperature sensors and light outputs to program them up to lighting for interactions. And in this process, students actually learn about engineering concepts like circuit design, about computer science concepts like variables, loops, and everything else, and also interface design on how to create variable applications which work for everyone. And in the electronic textile projects, they can also use personal items like bags or sweatshirt. So with Deborah Fields, we have developed actually a curriculum which went into high schools with a group called Exploring Computer Science, which has now nationwide over 5,000 teachers. And in full interest of disclosure, I should say that Jake Ships, who introduced me, was one of the first teachers actually working with us on creating these projects. And for many students, it's the first introduction into computer science and into programming beyond the screen. And I think this is really important. The project wasn't there to just teach coding, but also to help students to see that computing can be everywhere. I mean, out in the world, and what does this actually look like? And thousands of students across the US have now been introduced by making variables. 10 years ago, I moved into a very new area, which kind of moved away from the screen, but into the area of biodesign. And I know for many of us, when we think about biology, it's about observing, recording interactions which are happening between animals or ecologies. But in the last decade, innovations like CRISPR have turned biology actually into a place where you can make and grow your own designs. And so with colleagues Orkan Tellan, Karen Hogan, and Justice Walker, we have developed biodesign activities for high school classrooms. And for instance, we developed a low-cost biomaker lab, which you see here, which used chicken incubators, so that the students could use genetically modified yeast to grow their own bacterial cells. And we also developed a series of relevant classroom activities like biosensor or biocakes, where students, for instance, in biosensor could make an environmental sensor which would react if it detected a pollutant in the world. In the video, you can see if light is kind of waved over the sensor, it will actually illuminate and indicate that there is a pollutant in the state. We also did projects like biocakes where students essentially created enriched yeast, something like enriched rice, which is already available, and then designed molds to bake their own cakes. I can promise you everything smelled always very deliciously, but none of the cakes were eaten because that's not allowed. So these types of activities introduce students also of learning through design, but in a very kind of different, unexpected context where they grow and then also in the process think about the ethical and societal implementation of using these technologies. So growing your own design presents a new perspective on biology. And it's not just happening in academics. There are companies like Evocative Out who use mycelium mushrooms to grow leather-like materials for your personal phone checks. And there are many more possibilities to move into new forms of manufacturing. And finally, I want to talk about make your own AI. So my latest work kind of returns to the world of computer science and now focuses on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in the Create AI initiative, I'm working with colleagues from US and the Europe to examine on how we can kind of promote a different understanding and engagement with artificial intelligence, which is not just about becoming better users, but really understanding what are the functional and ethical implications. So my latest effort is on students to use generative AI. And my doctoral student, Luis Morales Navarro, last year conducted one of the first studies where students were creating their own small language models, which we call baby GPTs. And what you see here is actually a Marvel script generator created by a group of high school students who were not very enthusiastic about the latest Marvel movies and felt these could be improved. And so we have many other examples of Shakespeare script generators, which usually work well. And I think the most successful one recently was actually a recipe generator. And what you see here, so they fed in dozens of Marvel script and then they examined actually the output. What did the system generate? I have to tell you, they were mostly disappointed about the output because apparently the system doesn't very well understand. But what is even more important to us is not that they just designed these large language applications, but they began to better understand the impact of data which goes into the system and the ethical issues in terms of copyright, authorship, and attribution which come into play. So these baby GPTs, I mean, are nothing like ChatGPT. They have at most 30,000 to 70,000 tokens, and just as a reference point, ChatGPT uses like 3 trillion tokens. But I think it's enough to kind of help students understand what AI is all about. So, These are kind of just examples, Create AI, and exploring how we also can create tools and approaches which engage youth and students as designers of AI applications, not just users. And also to figure out way with algorithm auditing, for instance, on how they can check what the output of these systems is. Are they functional? Are they biased? Do they create harm? So that they have a better handle on what they can do with these activities. So let me wrap up. Learning by design, I think, is a powerful rationale, and I hope I have provided you with enough examples. There are many more on how we can use it in K-12 classroom. Most of my work has taken place there. And the goal is to empower learners for the 21st century, to provide them with some agencies about the technologies which are now everywhere in our life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. I do have a quick question for you. If you could redesign one aspect of how schools approach technology, what would it be?
Well, I just gave you a whole list of examples, and we actually, I think that's what I'm proud of. We have not just developed the tools like Scratch, but also created and tested the curricula to show that these kind of projects are actually able to run in classrooms, not just in after school or with very privileged kids. They actually are able to become other venues on how we can engage students in something like computer science, which turns out to be a topic which many students use on an everyday basis, but are not very interested in learning more about on how it is actually made. And so I think both for students, but also for teachers, we need to equip them with the tools and knowledge on how to kind of run this in classrooms. Thank you.
It's a special privilege tonight to honor so many unbelievable thinkers who are working so hard to make sure that humans remain at the center of these conversations about tools like AI and computer programming. And our next team of honorees are extraordinary scientists whose collaborative work has changed the way millions of people experience and understand the natural world. Honorees Dr. Serge Belongie and Dr. Pietro Perona are the visionary leaders behind Visipedia, a groundbreaking project that combines the power of artificial intelligence with the expertise of human communities. Their work forms the foundation for digital tools that many of us know and use, including the iNaturalist and Merlin Bird ID apps, which have been downloaded more than 30 million times and are used daily by birders, naturalists, students, and curious explorers of all ages. By weaving together computer vision, machine learning, and the collective knowledge of expert and amateur observers alike, Dr. Belongie and Dr. Perona have built a visual encyclopedia that makes the wonders of biodiversity accessible to anyone with a smartphone. In doing so, they have created far more than an app. They have given everyone, everywhere, the ability to connect with nature, contribute to global research, and personally participate in conservation. Dr. Belongie is a professor of computer science at the University of Copenhagen, where he also serves as head of the Pioneer Center for Artificial Intelligence. And Dr. Pietro Perona is the Alan E. Puckett Professor of Electrical Engineering at the California Institute of Technology, where he leads the Vision Group. Together, these two scientists embody the spirit of innovation that the Stibitz-Wilson Awards celebrate, harnessing cutting-edge technology not just for its own sake, but to deepen our understanding of life on Earth and to inspire communities around the globe. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Serge Belongie and Dr. Pietro Perona.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor, for the kind introduction. And thank you, Barbara, for inviting us. And we're delighted to be here. On a personal note, I was here in Bozeman, hurts to say it, 40 years ago when I was a graduate student. And my parents came from Italy to visit me. And they said, well, we're in the West, let's go and explore. And so we jumped into the car, and from Berkeley, we drove to the Grand Canyon and then came up here to Yellowstone. And we were blown away by the grandeur and immensity and the beauty of the Northwest of the US. And now I'm delighted to be back and spend the next 3 days in Yellowstone, and I'm looking forward to that. So I'm delighted to meet all of you tonight. Okay, so Serge and I come from the field of computer vision. And what does computer vision do? It is to try to endow machines with the same abilities that our visual system has, namely to be able to interpret images and videos. And what is vision? The vision is to know what is where by looking. And so this is a very concise definition due to David Marr. And it includes a knowing. So we have a mental picture of what is out there, a model of the world, without touching anything, and just by photons hitting our retina, we can build this description. And the question for all of us, from neuroscientists to psychologists to computer scientists, is what does this picture look like? How do we categorize? How do we describe things in the world? And people roughly divide the descriptions we have in our heads into geometry, so the where part, and identities or categories. And early on in my career at Caltech, I became interested in categorization, which was not a popular topic. And so what is categorization? Well, I can say that here I see a boy, I see a cow, I see a mountain, I see some trees, etc. So I can name objects, even if I've never met that cow before. I don't know its name, but I can say it's a cow. I generalize from my previous experience. And so I can generalize it's something amazing that our brain does from our previous experience. We formed this notion of categories, which is something that Plato recognized early on, and he thought that the only truth is categories, not the real objects in the world. And so how do we come up with categories? And all of us do it. And this question seems simple, but it's quite difficult. Like I could say it's a cow, I could say it's a Simmentaler cow, I could say it's an animal, a mammal. You know, at what level of a categorization scale should I operate? And how come I can form this idea that cows and horses are similar and cell phones and cows are not so similar? How did it happen? And so we were finding ourselves in this complicated scenario, which was not familiar to us because we're used to using geometry and mathematics to describe what we observe. And all of a sudden we have this idea of Platonic categorization. How do we put a computable form on it? And so we thought, well, you know, humans know a category or an object when they see it. And so we should just ask people to annotate images and to give us their views on what a computer should say upon seeing an image like this. So it was a radical departure from how our discipline worked before. Again, not any longer theorems, not any longer geometry or math or physics. It's more like build artificial psychology, and so probe the psychology, what is going on in people's minds, because the brain works, and so we should try to reproduce what the brain does to get started. And our initial steps were to collect large data sets, and here is the first one collected, Caltech 101, and this is my graduate student, Fei Li, who is our professor at Stanford. And so here we collected 101 categories, each one of them at least 100 images, and they were labeled by Caltech students. And so you see that there are pictures of ceiling fans, of Buddhas, of butterflies, of motorcycles, etc. And so we wanted to, so we said, well, okay, this is the definition of our task. And if we could build a piece of software that can reproduce human ability of classifying these images, then we can say that we've made a step forward in visual categorization. And there is a story I will not tell you, which takes off from Caltech 101 and goes to further work by Fei, which ImageNet. And ImageNet was the spark that triggered what we know as the AI revolution today. So it was in 2012, a crucial moment, and I will not tell you the story, but if you're curious, just look up Fei and ImageNet. Okay, so here it's us little nerds in a lab trying to understand what goes on, and we don't know anything about the world, we just know what Buddha and bonsai tree is. Is this useful at all? Is this something that defines a problem that ultimately will be useful to people? And here I was inspired by my father-in-law, who lived on Long Island. And one day he's walking around in Comset, which is a beautiful preserve, and he's texting me saying, "Can I eat this mushroom?" And I looked at the mushroom, and I thought, no, you shouldn't eat this mushroom. But I didn't know for sure. And so why does my father-in-law send me this picture instead of looking it up himself? He was the most computer-savvy old person that I knew. He has, early adopter of iPhone, crazy about Wikipedia. And I say, well, why doesn't he look up on Wikipedia? Well, it's very simple. He cannot put a name on it. And if he doesn't have a name, he doesn't have an entry point in Wikipedia. So this made me aware of the fact that there is a wealth of information out there, and all the mushrooms, all the Napoleonic battles, all the animals in Yellowstone, all have a Wikipedia page, but the person who walks around the street or in the park and looks at something, they have no idea what the name is, and so they don't know how to look up information. So there is a disconnect between your perception of the world and the questions you may have in mind and your ability to access the relevant information. And I thought, oh, okay, this is what we could do. This would be the place where we can use our knowledge of visual categorization to connect what people see with what people want to know. And so at the time, Serge had come to Caltech on a sabbatical, and so we started bouncing ideas back and forth. And we said, wouldn't it be nice if you go to the park and you see something that looks really interesting, and you could take a photo, and now your phone provides you with a species name in this case, and now you can use this tag, the magical key, to access the information that is there in Wikipedia. Now you can know, why is this bird here? Does it come in the winter and the summer? What does it eat? And can I eat it, maybe? And all of that. Since we're in Montana, I know that people... Okay. So wouldn't it be nice? And so Serge, especially myself, we engaged in a long brainstorming session of, let's find communities of use. So the initial grandiose idea was, well, okay, let's connect the visual world with Wikipedia. So we conceived of this project we call Visipedia. And then we realized, well, we cannot just put a visual interface on Wikipedia. It's too complicated. There are too many things to take care of. It's not going to work. Let's find a tiny fraction of the human community where people care a lot about this connection, and let's work with them, whatever small community it is, and let's make them really happy. And then once we've understood how it works, we can expand. And so we brainstorm on fashion, pathology, images, retina images, I forget what else we discussed. And in the end, we went for birds, because we thought, okay, first of all, birds are lovely to look at, and birders are buying expensive digital cameras, and so they're computer savvy, and they want to share, and they never know the name of all the birds they see, and so they want to know, and so on. And so we thought, okay, this is a magical community, and then one thing leads to another, and Serge will tell you more. The birders put us in touch with iNaturalist, which is a community of field naturalists and people like us who goes out and take pictures, and you share them and you want to know what is it. And so once we came in touch with iNaturalist, we realized, and so this is a snapshot of where iNaturalist was in 2015 when we started working with them. And so they had already collected 7,500,000 observations, with about 263,000 species. Now, the number of species is a little bit, it's a little bit confusing because for most species, they only had one image, but there were maybe 5,000 species for which there were enough images that our algorithms could learn to recognize them. And so we thought, okay, let's work with what they have, and let's take these 5,000 species, and let's build a computer vision system that can classify them for the user. And then the user is told what the species is, and that's how people get to start interacting and maybe contradicting our algorithm and saying, no, 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 it's a different one. And so this was very, very successful. And you will see later some numbers of today, where a naturalist is today. And so here you see the distribution of observations in 2015, and nowadays it is even more. Let me give you a sense for how it works. So here is me in Oregon on a different project. We're counting all the salmon that are going upstream in the Pacific Northwest. And so I was there just to look at what goes on. And here I take a picture of a salmon, and I realize, oh, there are many species of salmon. What could this be? And so I put it into a naturalist, and it gives me these choices, Chinook, pink, coho, and so on. And I know that by looking at it, it must be the top choice. So good job, my naturalist. And so I choose it. And then a bunch of other people come in, and they also agree on Chinook salmon. And so my naturalist now has this image labeled as research grade. You see it up there in the top right, which means that when enough people have agreed on what label it should take, so it first suggested it to me, I post it with my idea of what it should be, and then other people come in and they agree. And so now the picture has become part of a training set of a naturalist. And so a naturalist, the next time, tomorrow, will be able to do a better job on Chinook salmon because it has this image as well, right? It knows a little bit more about what they look like. So here, this shows you two aspects. One is there is a very nice interface that is not our work. It's a work of Scott Lorrie and his team, who are the owners of iNaturalist. And something else is we've turned the table of how an AI system works. It's not any longer Serge and I telling the system, do this. We tell you that this is something. No, the system has become a social machine. It knows about people out there, and it and it knows that people have knowledge and they agree or disagree, and so it's trying to mediate and to find out what people think about this, and then once it knows, then it trains itself, right? So now it's an autonomous system interacting with the crowd. So let me show you when it becomes critical. This is another photo during the same trip, and I use a naturalist, and it tells me it's a cutthroat trout. I hope in the audience somebody knows whether, so yell if you think it's wrong or whatever. And then the next person who comes in, so as you can see, I'm labeled as improving, which means the system knows that I don't know anything about this and it shouldn't trust me. And somebody else comes along and says, no, 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 it's a rainbow trout. Now, as you see, the system labels this person as a maverick, which is even less trustworthy than improving. And so it knows something about the people it interacts with. And now, two more people come along saying cutthroat, and Lee Kane even explains why it's not a rainbow, right? And so, as you can see, the system has a way of understanding how to mediate disagreements and whom to trust and whom not to trust. And I'm going a little bit fast there. And so now we have cutthroat trout as a research grade image. The third example, and the last one, here I'm walking in Massachusetts near Wellesley College. It is a nice pond, and I find this tree trunk. And I was curious, I can see the leaves of the tree down. I was curious if I could recognize the tree from the bark. And so what will the system say? And so let's see what the system says. Okay, so here you see highlighted the ability of the system to learn from the crowd. And clearly enough people are curious about trees that have been felled by beavers and take pictures. And this pattern, which is the tree felled by a beaver, is labeled as beaver. Okay? And so you can have the scat of the animals, you can have the footprints, all labeled with the name of the animal. And the system will just learn how to deal with this kind of information, and it will learn from the crowd. No problem. It says what the humans say. So here somehow we found our golden environment where we, the scientists, are providing technology, but we let the rest of the world dictate what our system should be doing and how. And the system is learning from the crowd. Okay. So this is today, and you see that from 7,500,000 observations, we have 275 million observations, and there are 3.8 million observers, and I'm told that it's 3 million active on any given month. And this is, I was curious, it's very easy to query the system, and so if you make an account and go online, you can find out anything you want about what the observations. And so this is Yellowstone, and you can see where people go or don't go in Yellowstone. And this summer, so from June to just 3 days ago, it's 15,000 observations just in Yellowstone National Park. Okay. Now, these are very dirty observations, because if I go and take a picture of a bison, well, there could have been an interesting plant next to it. I didn't photograph it. And so how can anyone make out anything from the information that is here? So maybe we just built a very sophisticated machine for glorified stamp collectors who want to let everybody know that they've seen a bison or a little flower or whatever. And so, good luck to them. And so we've gotten nice data, and maybe that's it. But actually, you can do science with this. And so thanks to the work of two very gifted postdoc and student in the lab, we are able, sorry, this is the growth. Okay, we're able, from the data that these observations give us, we're able to infer the distribution of species around the world. And so all of a sudden, we have an observatory for about 100,000 species worldwide, and we can guess where the distribution of these species. So this is really powerful once we learn how to use this data. Although the data is very dirty, well, statistics is very smart nowadays, and we can figure it out. And so I would like to pass the baton to Serge.
Great, thanks, Pietro. So I want to share some insights, a little bit of anecdotes about how the apps themselves came to be. And Pietro did a great job describing these motivating applications within iNaturalist, which is the app shown on the right. And we first came in contact with the naturalist community through birds, with the Merlin Bird ID group at Cornell. And circa 2008 or so, you might think that a couple AI researchers, if they wanted to work with these communities, you'd just email them, or you just knock on the door, say, hey, we're here to help, we have AI. Well, it turned out around that time, Merlin, the group at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, had been contacted by a lot of AI researchers offering their sort of tech solutionist skills, saying, we can solve your problems, we can recognize birds and so forth. And they had been burned many times. So they were a little bit tired of being approached by people like us. So we thought, well, that's an institution that's had over 100 years of audio recordings, decades of photos. They're greatly respected, but it's not time to reach out to them yet. So let's just start to make our own data set. In the tradition that Pietro described, like with Fei and the Caltech 101, we just started to build a data set of birds. We called it the Caltech UCSD 200 birds data set. And it was terrible. We just wrote a script, as computer scientists do, and we just went around crawling various websites looking for birds based on the species name and the common name. But as far as computer scientists would know, it was a perfectly fine data set. So we put this thing together, so-called Cub 200, and we wrote our first couple papers using it and kind of patted ourselves on the back that we had sort of gotten the ball rolling on bird recognition. So that turned out to be the way to reach out to the Cornell Lab of O, but not in the way that we expected. It was kind of a bat signal, but a very crappy one. So they did hear what we were doing, and they said, you may visit us. So I got on a plane and I went out to Sapsucker Woods, and in so many words, they said, your data set stinks. but we're interested in what you're doing, and you may collaborate with us if you wish. And so we did begin that collaboration, and the reason I'm mentioning this is that this is about trust between communities. They had been burned enough, and they didn't need it to happen again, and they saw what we were doing as kind of committing the same sin that tech solutionists do a lot of the time, or really cutting out the stakeholders and not understanding what the communities actually wanted. So that's one thing that we experienced. And then the other one, I really want to showcase the chief research and engineer, former student of ours, Grant Van Horn, who did he embedded himself within these communities. So he spent weeks at a time with the iNaturalist group, with the Merlin Bird ID people. And another little anecdote just to show the way that the way that Visipedia approaches these problems with human communities of knowledge, with technology. When Grant embedded himself with the iNaturalist team, in the very first stages of taking all these images, the training data that Pietro talked about, choosing the species that had enough training images so that the system could work, he got that all working on the back end. The engineering was great, and it was ready to roll out in beta to a small, trusted group of iNaturalist users. So he made what we thought was a very innocuous decision, which is to put a button on the app which just said at the time, identify species. I think it just said identify. So it seemed fine, and he probably sent it to our colleague at iNaturalist. Here's the demo. It's got a button that says identify. And then he finds out later that they were furious about this. Why were they furious? In so many words, what our iNaturalist contacts told us is, you don't identify the species. We identify the species. Change the button. So he changed it to what we see today, which is suggest species. And then what you see, as Pietro described, you see things that are visually similar and seen nearby. And so the user can scroll through it, tap on things, get more information. And that was somewhat intimidating and eye-opening for Grant, this poor student that we had sent off to work with them in the trenches. But they were serious about that, and that's something that we carry with us to this day in terms of the trust that we build with these communities. As some of you may know who use the Merlin app, we've gone beyond the use of vision only to so-called multimodal approaches. So this could involve audio, video clips, high-resolution still images, and these different modalities can be highly complementary. So you can actually go out to a place with lots of birds, not take a single photo, and just let a spectrogram pass by in real time and see the different birds that are around you. So, and as generative AI gets more and more powerful, we're going to see more of these types of technologies that are more conversational and more immersive and richer experiences taking shape. And Pietro also mentioned that there have been fantastic postdocs, PhD students, and so forth. But in particular, we want to showcase some of the contacts that we've had that made this thing possible. So from iNaturalist, Pietro mentioned Scott Lorrie. So he provided this trust, this connection to us to allow his community to connect with AI in a way that they found constructive and mutually positively reinforcing. Jessie at the Cornell Lab of O, she was the one that told us our data set stunk and then led to a decade-plus collaboration. And then at Google Research, Hartwig Adam, at a time where Pietro and I were having trouble getting funding from the traditional sources because this whole idea of fine-grained categories didn't really make sense to a lot of the different funding agencies. Everybody was looking at these ImageNet type data sets, and we were saying people really want to know about these specific categories. They don't just want to point their phone at a mushroom and have it say mushroom. They don't need the phone to tell them that. So Hartwig Adam at Google in the LA office was extremely supportive, and that led to a very large amount of funding over a 6+ year period, which made a lot of this technology possible, and also found its way into a Google product, which is called Lens. So this is really a big thank you to all the people, and this is just some of the ones that have helped us in this. And with that, we would just like to say thank you once again, and this has been a fantastic event.
Thank you both so much for sharing this story with us. I know I probably speak for other people in the audience when I say that Merlin turned me into a birder because I can't carry the books with me everywhere I go. And it's great to be able to hold the phone up and listen to the birds, identify them, and then find them with my binoculars. So that's been a revolution for me. I think we have time for a couple of questions, if you guys don't mind. One thing I want to ask about is your work is kind of notable for combining the cutting-edge AI with the human expertise. How can we make sure that people remain at the center of the process as AI continues to expand and infiltrate so many areas of our lives?
Yeah, I think the pattern that we established early on was that the communities approach us and not the other way around. So in our day jobs, we do research with students, we write papers, we publish open source code, and we get the word out through these apps. And so I think the really important thing is showcasing the communities, that it's the communities that get the apps and the network in place. And at the point where they say, we would like to bring some AI functionality into what we're doing, there's now enough of a community out there that will say, you should talk to the Visipedia people, because they will understand the way your communities work. So it's really going in that direction, but that it can be frustrating because I do want to reach out to certain communities, but the climate right now around AI is such that that doesn't always go over well. So we sort of have to sit tight and wait for them to contact us.
I can add something complementary, which is, let's think of what kind of information does AI process nowadays, and it is text and images that it finds on the internet. This is it. But the world that we're interested in is much richer, and we are the ones with the bodies and the senses to go out and inspect it and form an opinion. So take something extremely simple. How do you tie your shoes? It's not written anywhere, or maybe if it's written, it's useless. You couldn't train a robot with that. So you need a human to teach a machine in some way, right, by demonstration or whatever. And now going into a bigger domain, think of an electrician or a plumber, or think of a chemist who is in the lab. There are so many things that are not well explained in the research papers or in the manuals, and you learn by just doing them. And so my guess is that, yes, some fields are going to be highly automated, and sometimes you do want to take people out. So suppose that you're landing at the SFO when it's foggy. Do you want to insist that it's a pilot who lands the plane, or do you want to let a radar-guided landing system land the plane? You want to take the human out, right? So in some cases, you do want to take the human out. And suppose that one day mammographies could be read more accurately by the machine rather than by the human, then it would be a good idea. Or my wife, who's sitting here, says, I have to commute, my commute is 35 minutes, 40 minutes every day. I'm not a person I'm a mathematician. I shouldn't be allowed to drive because my mind wanders. I think that people, 5 years from now, it would be good to insist that I just let the machine do its job. So it can go both ways, and humans have a lot of advantages with respect to machines because we are the ones roaming the world and deciding on what is meaningful. And so we should be in charge in most cases. But of course, we have to keep our eyes open and see what happens.
Thank you so much. This is kind of related to something that Serge and I were talking about at lunch. Over the next decade, what do you foresee as the next big breakthrough in AI, maybe with Visipedia at the heart, in conservation or in society more broadly? Where are you going next with this?
So I started to just touch on this with the multimodal approach, and Pietro really put his finger on the embodiment piece as well, that there's been quite a bit of AI that's sort of brain in a jar type approaches. It's just the server chugging away somewhere, and the text and the images and the sounds are coming in. But I think what we're going to see is a lot more of this so-called embodied learning. And that could be by virtue of robotics getting more advanced, and they have sensing equipment and they're exploring the world. It could also be through various types of wearable devices or some combination of the two. But I think that we're moving away from what you might call the data set AI era, where everything was just and we're part of that. I mean, we're guilty as charged here, but the data set AI era involved large collections of images and published benchmarks and lots of competitions on those and so on. But I think that we're moving into a different era of embodied learning. And in that case, it's not that you close the book on a data set, that the data just keeps coming. And it's actually illuminating that the field of embodied learning often uses terms like habitat, environment. They use it figuratively. And I found that the use of those terms bugs me because we've been working with real habitats and real environments. You just, at any given moment, you could mobilize 1 million iNaturalist users to just walk outside, and there's your environment. So I'm pretty excited about this idea of multimodal learning, the embodied aspect of it, the human that's out there interacting with things and able to capture things. So I think that the key buzzwords there are multimodal and embodied.
And just to give a shorter term, I mean, I completely agree with what Serge is saying. Shorter term point of view on iNaturalist, so just to give a couple of examples. There are, as you saw for the cutthroat trout, there are conversations that go on between experts in iNaturalist on why did they decide to use a certain label for a certain species. And this conversation may take many turns until there is consensus or not. Our system is unable to do that at the moment, so that would be an obvious thing that we want to do, that the system explains to a human why it would be reasonable to make the determination that it did. Okay, so that would be one kind of example. Yeah, maybe, so another one would be, so again, tying to what we're showing, we have guesses of the species distributions, and so the system, iNaturalist, knows where it's least certain about the species distribution. So it can help humans decide where to go next, and so to resolve a puzzle. Like, you know, the spotted owl is in some forest in the Pacific Northwest, and I think it's here. And here it's a very spotted owl type environment where nobody has reported anything. You know, could you guys go out next Sunday and tell me if you hear one or whatever? Mm-hmm. And so that's another, just to tell you, ideas that are being bounced around at the moment.
Super. Well, thank you both so much for that really illuminating presentation and for answering a couple of questions. Let's give a big round of applause to Dr. Perona and Dr. Belongie and to all our honorees. And I'm going to welcome Barbara back to the stage for some closing comments.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I was inspired, okay? And thank you all for being here this evening as we celebrate the extraordinary scientists and educators. Their work reminds us what's possible when curiosity meets determination and when knowledge is pursued to improve the world we live in. Tonight's honorees have shown us that innovation thrives when ideas are tested, challenged, and shared, and that science is never a solitary pursuit, it's a collective journey that invites us to imagine, to question, and to discover. Scientific inquiry defines us and drives us, and we hope you leave here tonight with new ideas, renewed wonder, and a spark of curiosity to carry forward. And if you appreciate the work we're doing at the museum and on this stage, we hope you consider supporting Stibitz-Wilson Awards and the museum. Information is in your Tonight's program. Thank you again for joining us in this annual celebration of science, and thank you, the museum team, for all you've done to make these awards possible. Our front desk staff, Maddie, Will, Halen, and Ren, Jake Chips, and Laura Brind. And I am particularly grateful to our executive director, Eleanor Barker, for her amazing work, hard work, and dedication to bring this event to this stage. From all of us at the American Computer and Robotics Museum, we wish you a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you at the museum. Good night. Thank you.